So if you guys watched the last video, you saw I went through and made the door jamb pieces that connect to the quarter panels, these parts right here, and then I ended off the last video by saying I have an issue and I have to go through and redo a decent amount of work. And I've been thinking about it over the past day and a half, hesitant to start on it because I want to think this through and do it the right way, but also the most, I don't know, like the best way. I just don't want to start cutting and then, think of something else. So I've tried to think this through. I got a pretty solid plan in place, I feel like. So without further ado, let me go ahead and show you the issue that I have going on here and show you why I'm gonna have to do what I need to do here. Towards the end of the previous video, I started working on a patch for the rocker to lower quarter transition, and it was all going pretty good. I got the shape of the piece dialed in, but there's one thing that I don't know if I obviously overlooked it. I don't know why this is an issue. I know part of the reason why it's an issue, but the rocker panel is not straight, just to put it simply. I can prove that right here with this ruler. And if we put this on this side right here, right, this rocker is completely level and even against this. We move this slowly forward and you can see it starts to bow out. It's nothing super crazy up front there, maybe 1/8 of an inch gap. We start to move this all the way back, and this is where our issue lies. That is a lot more than 1/8 of an inch, and that is obviously not straight. From the factory, there was a lip about right here that the rear section of the quarter panel would basically butt up to, and then they would fill this with lead. Now, that lip, like I said, ended basically, we'll say where the black line is on the ruler. That's a good marking point. Now, if we look at everything before that, that is not straight there as well. And I do not want to go through and fill that with almost 1/4 inch of Bondo to make that match up with the rear of the quarter panel here. Ignore the note on this side of the ruler. I was using that to line up with a cutoff wheel, so I know that side's not straight. This side is straight here. I also didn't finish metal finishing this section down here. I stopped midway through, so that's why it's looking a little rough, but I didn't want to go through and complete that when I knew it was going to get cut out anyway. More we go back here, we have more light peeking through and more of a gap. So you can see that quarter panel is also not straight on here. And for the life of me, I could not figure out why that quarter panel was just sticking out in this one section. I have this lower area completely pressed up against the rocker panel here, and it cannot go in anymore until take a look at the inside of the rocker, in between the rocker and the quarter panel, and all the way up there you can see that little bit of daylight peeking through, and then up above that you can see the part that's touching the quarter panel. So somewhere down in there is a piece sticking out on the rocker panel that is pushing against the quarter panel. So back here, right, I can push this up against the rocker. Back here I can, back here I can. Right here is where that stops. It hits a bump, a nub, whatever you want to call it. There's something on the rocker panel that is sticking out, preventing the quarter panel from going in as far as it should. So you might be thinking it's not that big of an issue, right? Just maybe cut that little section out, push the quarter panel in, make a piece, splice that, yada, yada, yada. I don't want to do it that way, and I feel like I have a decent reasoning behind that. Reasoning number one is this section back here. When I built these rocker panels, I modeled them off of the factory one, so I got this weird shape back here. This is kind of where everything would have come together, the quarter panel, rocker panel, stuff like that. So it's got this random shape right here, which I was not a fan of. In the last video, I talked about, possibly just putting the exhaust right there to eliminate that issue. I don't want to do that. I want to stick with my original plan of probably putting the exhaust, midway towards the rear of the door, so somewhere in this area opposed to that area. So if I go through, cut off this rocker panel, I can go through and fix that, make it a flat bottom there. And then my other issue, which I have been avoiding and turning my head away for the past year is the bottom of this rocker panel here is not 100% straight either. So that is 18-year-old Kale just overlooking yet another thing and affecting me at a later date. But you can see right here, we got a gap through that, we got a gap through that. It's not perfectly straight, right? And in order to go through and build this chassis the way I want, and I haven't fully decided if I'm going to or not, but it's still an idea in the back of my mind, and I don't want to screw myself over later like I'm doing right now. But if I go to do a belly pan on this thing in the future, it's got to be sealed off. It's got to be completely flat, right? I don't want any waves in anything. I don't want any gaps. And once again, I don't want to go through and fix these issues with body filler. It's the last thing I want to do. So that's the plan of attack going forward. It's not something I necessarily want to do. It's something that needs to be done, and it needs to be done right. This is the foundation of the car. I just hate this cycle of doing something and then, you know, 6 months, a year, year and a half later down the line, it's not up to the standard that I can do currently. I don't like it. It's not correct. It's an endless cycle. I have a certain standard of what I want this car to be once it's done. I have a goal of where I want it to be when it's done, and I don't want anything less. Unfortunately, it requires, like I said, doing things like this, but it's just how it is. Gonna take my time, measure everything multitude of times, make sure the angles are right, tack everything in place, double, triple check, and we're just gonna go from there. Take my time, make sure everything is 100% perfect, because I do not want to redo these for a third time. I had a lot of work into building these essentially from scratch the first time there. But I feel like what I learned from that and a bunch of stuff I learned from doing all the metal work, you know, over the past few months, I can apply it into these new rockers here, make them better, and hopefully produce a product faster. It has been a minute since those last clips you guys saw there, but I'm back to working on the Charger now. And before I get too far along into the new rocker panels and rocker panel design, I figured I'd show you guys what the game plan is and kind of what I decided moving forward here. The last rocker panel design obviously is scrapped, and since then I made one more and I wasn't happy with it. I just kind of planned it all out on paper. While I was working on the Duster, I had a couple months to think about exactly what I want to do, and I came up with by far the best plan yet and the best plan to actually make these. So starting off, I went through and designed all these pieces in Fusion 360. They're super simple, but that allowed me to go through and get Send Cut Send to cut them all so they're all perfect. They're all the same. I didn't have to spend a lot of time hand cutting everything, nor was I going to get 20 of these plates hand cut and drilled all the same and then get these pieces bent all the same as well. In order to make this work with their capabilities, I had to split the rocker panels into 2 sections each. So this is the front half of the passenger side. There'll be an identical piece that goes on the back with 5 of these essentially spacers as well. My other plan for the panels that I was thinking of that I ended up not making was this style right here. The biggest difference is this bottom part is a lot longer, and then this back piece has this angle on it, where on the new one it's a perfect 90-degree angle, which is what I wanted to do. Honestly, not totally sure why I designed these ones this way, but I'm glad I ended up not going that route. The new ones here, you can see these are the measurements for the base plates. I went through, figured out the angle of the side pieces. That way it matches the angle on this quarter panel. And then of course the angle on the bottom half of the door that goes in line with this body line right here. Once it's all set and done and you look at the car from the side, from this body line all the way down, from the back of the quarter all the way through the door to the front of the fender, will all follow the same angle that basically goes down into the rocker panel. It'll look all seamless like one piece. Once I had these pieces designed, and then of course the new center pieces, these are all the spacers that go in between everything, threw them in the computer, made some quick files, sent them out to Send Cut Send. They got everything cut out for me. The only thing that I had to change once these arrived was go through and run the ends through the belt sander, just because the way that they were cut, there was a little basically burr on the end. You can still kind of see it on the circle right here. So that little piece was throwing off this bottom piece from being completely level, as well as this piece on the end. So got everything cleaned up, and now that that is done, that leads me back to the point where I'm at right now, where everything is measured out, and I'm starting to tack these new pieces into place. I got both halves with the spacers tacked together, going to weld them together to make one full rocker panel. And these are the little details that you have to pay attention to. The pieces would not slide together perfectly, and that is because when I had this tack on the end right here, you can see a little bit of the weld kind of pulled over onto the plate. So when I went to go take the outer skin of the rocker panel from the other one to slide it over this half, it would not perfectly line up. It would have put both pieces in a little bit of an angle. So I'm gonna go ahead, get this file down completely smooth on both of these right here. Then both halves should go together no problem, and I can get them tacked together over there. After all that welding and waiting around for pieces to cool off while they were clamped down in place, the rocker panels are complete now. So I'm happy with the results. These things are laser straight, which obviously was the whole point of redoing these here. So I'm happy that I took the time, did everything properly. One thing I did want to mention is that the inside plate right here, so this big piece along with these spacers, that's all 1/8 inch. That's the main structure, and then this is basically sheet metal skin to give me the shape and the angled piece on the outside. Pretty much everything on the car is 17 gauge sheet metal. For this I went to 16 gauge, just a little bit thicker, to prevent or lessen, any chance of it warping. So these are a little bit on the heavier side, but that's all right. We're going to be losing weight in plenty of other panels throughout the rest of this car here. I wanted these to be strong, especially these inside pieces, because it gives me the option to either make body mounts off of that, or I can weld the frame rails straight to that, depending on which route I want to go, whether this thing will be unibody or the shell will be able to come off the entire chassis. That's a decision for later down the road, but at least this gives me the option going forward. Last thing that needs to be done to these welding wise is I just got to weld the outside seam right there. I didn't want to weld that right now or while these were on my little fixture table, just because that's a pretty substantial amount of welding, and that would have definitely done some warping to it. So I went through and did the center third section on every single space right there. I'll weld the outside once it's actually up in the car and everything is braced up. That should work out pretty good, but everything is primed with some self-etching primer on the inside. I'm gonna go ahead and toss a coat of paint on them as well, some pretty durable paint. I already got that on the bottom side of the sill panels that are in the car. So once I can get that on, I can go ahead and actually mock up the rocker panels, show you guys kind of how this is all going to come together before we close out this video here. Figured I would end off this video here showing the rocker panel all tacked in place. That way you can kind of see how it's going to come together. So new rocker panel design versus old rocker panel design. This one was obviously mimicked off the factory style of the rocker panel, just a little bit simplified. This is a new, improved, stronger, straighter, squarer, just all around much better rocker panels. I went ahead and did a tack weld every 2 inches on this top lip here. I got a nice 1/8 inch gap all the way across from the top of the inner rocker to the top of the outer rocker. So it'll be welded, gap, welded, gap, welded, gap. Once it's all set and done, I think it'll look really good. Should be super strong. No problems. This piece right here is on a nice 90-degree angle to the bottom of the table. It is square. The bottom of the rocker panel is also square, so that'll come into play once I do the flat bottom or the flat floor on this car. I think that'll look real nice once it's all said and done. On the outside here, you can see my measurements worked out really well, and that'll be a nice gap to weld up once the time comes for that. So I'm pretty happy with the way that worked out. And then the angle of the outer rocker here is the same angle as the bottom of the door. So you can see this body line that is right here. I forget exactly what the angle is off the top of my head, but that'll line up with the side right here. It'll all look like it's one piece coming down. I think that'll look pretty good. And then the quarter panel will flow into that as well. The next steps will be I need to make some stands from the bottom of the new rocker panels to the chassis table. I need to make the rear door jamb to quarter piece. I gotta make the inner piece as well. So there's a lot of pieces that need to be made. Everything is going to get tacked into place first. Once I can double, triple check all that, I'll go through, fully weld it up and metal finish that. So that's probably gonna take the next week or two. Will be my best guess there. I know building rocker panels for the second time is not the most interesting of things, but sometimes you just gotta take 2 steps back to make 1 big step forward. And this is gonna make a lot of things going forward easier. I have the ease of mind now knowing that this one is perfectly straight and square. That was the whole point of doing this again, with the side factor that we get to improve on the design as well. So I'm pretty happy just seeing this all in place here. I know it's, like I said, not the most exciting thing, but it will come into play once we start getting chassis stuff laid out and the quarter panel, doors, gaps, everything like that.